Good.
Hello, wherever you may be. Welcome to our Facebook Live event. We're coming to you live from Lutheran World Relief headquarters in Baltimore, and we're going to be talking about our emergency response to Hurricane Maria in Puerto Rico. My name is John Rivera. I'm the Media Relations Manager for Lutheran World Relief, and this is my colleague.
I'm Noah Steinberg Stefano, and I'm the Program Associate for Emergency Operations.
You may hear a voice off camera, and that'll be Ryan Eisenman, who will relay your questions to us. He's our social media guru. And if you have any questions, just type them into the comments section, and Ryan will be able to convey them to us. And if you run out of time and you have them after the session, you can still put them in the comments section, and we'll get back to you at some point. And one more favor, if you could just take a second right now and let us know where you're listening from. We'd like to see where people are listening to us from, and I'm sure it's all over the country and maybe all over the world. So Noah and I just returned from Puerto Rico. Noah was there for about 10 days, almost 2 weeks. I was there more for 4 or 5 days, where we were doing some assessments and gathering some stories, talking to people who were affected by Hurricane Maria. And so we'll just talk a little bit about what we saw and what Lutheran World Relief is doing.
Thanks,
so
John.
Noah, it's been about 2 months since Hurricane Maria hit.
Yes.
Where do things stand now?
So it was a really eye-opening experience spending time in Puerto Rico. We were in Adjuntas, about 2 hours, a municipality about 2 hours from San Juan in a fairly rural part of the island. And it's really, I kept having to remind myself that it had been 6 weeks since this hurricane hit. It's still 85% of the island is without power. Millions of people are without running water, and from flying into the airport in San Juan to driving through the country and visiting the houses and the families that we went to during the assessments, the destruction is still, heartbreaking and very visible. So people are just starting to pick up the pieces, begin the rebuilding process, but the whole island and the millions of people that live there have really been devastated and are trying to get their lives back on track.
So Lutheran World Relief is responding in this municipality of Adjuntas.
Mm-hmm.
Where is that? What does it look like? Could you describe it? And where is it from San Juan?
Yeah, so if anyone who's been to Puerto Rico, and been to San Juan or other parts throughout the country, Adjuntas, the area we're working, is very rural. It's a small town municipality, sort of, if you're imagining the island, pretty much smack dab in the middle of it's about a 2-hour drive from the capital. But it's a very different reality from what you would find in San Juan, and I think that's reflected in the recovery process. So flying in and spending time in San Juan, although many areas on the outskirts of the city are still without power and are still, the destruction is very vast and visible, it has been quicker to recover, being the capital city where a lot of the aid and assistance has come in. But smaller villages in the mountains and the interior of the island have really been much slower to recuperate. Logistically, it's been very difficult to get aid trucks on mostly dirt roads to access villages in the mountains. So the recovery process has been a lot slower and is vastly different from what you see kind of coming into the country, to the island, and then as you get into these more mountainous villages in the interior.
And just talk a little bit about the terrain. How mountainous is it?
So when I got there, when I was arriving to Adjuntas, we were approaching dusk because we hit a lot of traffic coming in from San Juan, and as there's no power, there's no so it was getting dark, and we probably, after coming off the highway, go on keep consistently climbing through these mountain roads where half of it is often cut off still from landslides and trees. So it's kind of have to maneuver your way around the debris that's still blocking a lot of the roads for about a half an hour at least after you're exiting the main highway. So it's a pretty remote and rural area, and that's really the reality that you'll find in much of the interior of the island in Puerto Rico for those who have had the opportunity to visit. And yeah.
Mm-hmm. And so, what are the greatest needs that you saw there among the people of Adjuntas?
Yeah, I mean, I was really struck by, I think shortly before I came, I read a New York Times article that said that Puerto Rico, it was almost like going back in time. Mm-hmm. And I think that I found myself thinking about that a lot when I was there, because, you know, you walk the streets after 7:30 and it's pitch black. There are a couple businesses, that are running off generators. But for the most part, nobody has power. There are also some businesses, hotels, restaurants will have running water, but for the most part, people are shut off from that as well. So electricity, people are getting by with help from solar lanterns. That's one thing that LWR will be addressing. I'll talk about that a little bit more when we get into our response. But water is really, the most pressing need for people waiting in line for 2 hours we saw that together when we walked by the refuge, waiting in line for 2 hours for water distributions, and just those two things and the complications that come with them. We don't really think about that on a day-to-day basis, but getting into the city and none of the traffic lights work, and you have to have people directing traffic all day because and so it's very chaotic, and as you can imagine, the impact that this has had on the health infrastructure. Hospitals completely cut off from electricity or running on generators. If the generator fails and someone is on a machine that requires electricity, their life can be at stake. And obviously all of the health problems and the waterborne illnesses that have arisen with people having to take water from rivers and streams. So there are so many issues with the water and electricity and the lack of availability of those two things that come up that we don't think about, and was really amazing and shocking for me to witness and adjust to in the time that I was there.
What are people doing for water? How are they getting it?
So most people you'll see driving, even on the highway, driving through Puerto Rico, and especially on these mountain roads, like PVC pipes filtering down rainwater from the mountains, and people collecting them in buckets, water bottles, and people will spend, this is a daily activity for some families, collecting rainwater and either trying to either running it through water filters, or if they are able to get chlorine tablets to try to make it safe for bathing and cooking and drinking. Mm-hmm. And then there are also I think it's a lot easier, again, in either cities or capitals, for people are able to buy water at the supermarket, but we heard stories of the supermarket opens at 8, and by 9:30 the water is all gone. Yeah. So because people are lining up for hours to be able to purchase it, so there's a huge shortage of water, and I think the impact that's having on people's lives when they're trying to get their lives back on track, and they have homes to rebuild, and they have to take 3-4 hours out of every day to just get water for bathing and cooking and drinking is really making people's lives incredibly difficult.
So I think that's a good segue into what Lutheran World Relief is going to be doing. What are we planning in terms of a response there?
Yeah, so we're working with local organizations in Puerto Rico. We haven't worked there in the past, and we don't have an established presence there. So you and I were going there, as you said, to do assessments, to connect with people who have a really good pulse of the local community and the needs on the ground. So we're working through local organizations to distribute solar lanterns, water filters, and also work on cash transfer programming. And so the latter part of that For those of you that are watching that might be familiar, it's something that we've done in the past in Nepal, Haiti, and I believe the Philippines.
Yep.
And the needs are so diverse and vast. Every family might need something different, whether it's catching up with rent payments, rebuilding their home, providing medicine, groceries for their family, as many people have lost their jobs because this has been really devastating to industry and businesses all over the island. So the cash transfer programming allows us to get the resources of LWR directly into the hands of families who have either suffered job losses, damages to their home, and can contribute to the rebuilding process. We're not rebuilding entire homes, but we are providing resources directly into the hands of families that can help them with one part of the process, to provide groceries or contribute to funds for rebuilding a roof, things like that. But the importance of this is it really allows the families to be the decision makers of how they can use these resources and this help to help them in the road to rebuilding for themselves, and they're in the best position to make that decision. So,
and I guess a side benefit to that as well is it helps the local economy.
Exactly. Yeah.
It injects some much needed cash into local merchants' hands.
Yeah, and that's really important because one thing that's really important to remember about this disaster is Puerto Rico was really at a breaking point before Maria happened. Mm-hmm. This is a very the island in general has a poverty rate about 45%. It's over 60% in the area where our project is focused. So a lot of people were sort of on the brink when this happened, and when their homes were destroyed, and many of them have been unable to work. Schools haven't been open in the past 2 months. So anyone involved with the education system, and a number of businesses, tourism, which is really the engine of their economy, have been either out of work or slow to recover. So you're right. The cash transfer aspect is really a crucial investment and injection into the local economy while helping families on the path to getting back on track.
Great.
Yeah.
Why don't we see if Ryan has any questions to relate to us?
Yeah, we have a question from Eddie. And Eddie said, the impression we get is that everyone wants to leave Puerto Rico. Is that what you encountered when you were there?
Wow, that's a great question. And I think that we had some really interesting and powerful conversations with people about that, because a lot of people feel that Puerto Ricans are incredibly proud people, incredibly proud, incredibly passionate about their homeland. But a lot of them feel like they don't have a choice, especially we met a family, and this was, John wrote about it in our communications materials, but where the day after we spoke with him, he had family in Ohio, and his kids hadn't been to, he had kids, I think they were like 9, 11, 12, and 15, something like that, but all sort of end of elementary school, beginning of high school age, and he was sending them to live with an aunt in Ohio while their house was completely destroyed, while he saved money to rebuild their house, and then he said he wanted to bring them back in after the school year was over. And that's just, there's so many stories like that of people that want to be part of the rebuilding process. They have so much passion for Puerto Rico and for their homeland, but some of them who do have the option, who do have relatives on the mainland and have the option to send their children or to go live with them, because they can't wait. The help has been very slow to arrive from the U.S. government, from FEMA, from the electric company, getting the grid, getting back online, and they just need to get their lives back on track. They need to get their children back in school. So it's not an easy decision for people to make. I think it's really tearing at people's heartstrings. But a lot of, I was just looking this up, so far 100, and just this is just to Florida, but 150,000 Puerto Ricans have moved to Florida since Hurricane Maria. I think most of them hope to come back as soon as the electric grid gets back on, the schools open, and things get back on track. But yeah, it's a great question.
And that's out of a population of about 3.4 million in the island. So that's a pretty significant proportion.
Yeah.
That was a really heartbreaking story for me, too. We actually happened upon them the night before his family was going to get on the plane. They were going to get on the plane the next morning. And you could see how sad they were and how sad he was and how much his family really loved him. And he said, how long are they going to go for, we asked him. And he said, for a year, and then we'll see. So there's no guarantee that they'd even come back. But he said he's going to stay there, and you could see he was rebuilding a concrete reinforced house. So in the next hurricane, it wouldn't blow over. They lived in a wooden house, and almost all the houses that were destroyed were made of wood. And if they lived in concrete reinforced houses, those fared much better.
Yeah, that was a really powerful story.
Yeah, and we're going to have a link to those stories on the Facebook page. They may have put that up already, but a lot of powerful stories and photos that we saw during our time there.
We had another question on some earlier updates on our Facebook page from Marge, and she was asking if we have any plans to send quilts and kits to Puerto Rico.
Sure. Yeah, that's a great question. So thank you, Marge. So we were looking into that sort of earlier on in the response. I think logistically, the port of San Juan is still really built up. There were a couple weeks when it was very difficult to get anything through. So I think that logistically, we don't think it's a good situation to be able to send quilts and kits because it would take a long time for them to arrive. And so we're focusing our response more on the water filters and solar lanterns because they're really the most pressing needs for people who have been affected.
Kind of a fundamental question is, it's unusual for Lutheran World Relief to respond in the United States. We generally respond overseas only. Why are we even responding in Puerto Rico?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think there was a lot of discussion, with our team and with our organization. But when you look at the need, I mentioned this a little bit before, but Puerto Rico has, their poverty rates throughout the island are twice as much as the poorest state in the continental U.S., which is Mississippi, and it's over almost at 50% across the island, and so and that's really apparent, especially in the area where we're working. It's over 60%. So when we looked at the need and we looked at the people that were affected and just the complete devastation, just the power grid completely wiped out, and also we thought that we could really fill a gap with the work that we're doing. There aren't a lot of international organizations working in Puerto Rico, and there also isn't a really strong, robust, and well-funded national or local NGO network. So I think that those are some of the criteria that we consider when we look how we can fill a gap and deliver service and address a need that isn't being addressed by other organizations or by other entities. And that's, again, one of the reasons that we're choosing to work in the part of the island where we are. There is the help that has arrived is sort of concentrated around the capital city, but a lot of the other smaller mountain villages in the interior have been sort of disregarded. So we've kept that criteria in mind when thinking about how to respond and how to structure our response.
And just kind of a related question, Houston and Florida also received a lot of damage, a lot of destruction there. Why didn't we respond in those areas?
Yeah, Yeah, this is again something that we really talked about a lot within with our team. But when you look at the situation in Houston and the people that were affected by that was devastating. And whenever something like this happens, we talk about the situation and what, if anything, we can do to help. But because of the location of Houston, you had hundreds of people, local organizations, international organizations, churches, individuals that were able, as soon as the floodwaters subsided, to drive in from surrounding areas and get help to people that needed it. So we didn't feel that was a situation that we could, it would necessarily be filling a gap in the way that we could in Puerto Rico. And there are other organizations that we recommend to our supporters and our donors that are better equipped to respond to a disaster in the continental United States. So our organization is specifically structured to respond internationally, and we have the connections and the alliances to do so effectively. And looking at Puerto Rico, it's sort of, although it is a U.S. territory, it, number one, as far as the need, the poverty levels, and the complete devastation, and frankly, it has been treated very differently than Houston and Florida. I think that's important for everyone to know and to keep in mind when you see that 6 weeks, almost 2 months later, many people have not heard from FEMA. They haven't heard from any or gotten any kind of support. So it's important to look at the way that these different disasters have been handled, and also look at what we can do as an organization to fill the gaps and to really address a need.
Mm-hmm. And I think this is a good point, time to just make the point that we have received a lot of very generous help from our donors. And our response is really well-funded, and without the help of our donors, we wouldn't be able to do the work that we're doing right now.
Yeah, I think that being involved with this project and kind of seeing how our capacity to respond has expanded from when we initially launched the project to kind of where we are now has been really exciting and heartwarming for me personally, because I think coordinating this project and when you see that literally you're able to target, say, at the beginning 100 families, and then when you see just through the generosity of donors and supporters, that number go up to 300. It's really exciting and encouraging. So I reiterate that. I want to thank everyone who's contributed to this, because it really has vastly expanded the reach of the project and the number of people we're able to impact.
Great.
John and Noah, I think we have time for one more question. We had a question from Michael, who's watching right now, and he asked, what was the source of the livelihoods of the families that you met?
Great question. Mm-hmm. So the area where we're working, it's actually a very agricultural part of the country, where a lot of people are coffee farmers, day laborers, work in construction. Some people, commute long distances to work in tourism in a city called Ponce, which is closer to the coast. But I think the agricultural livelihood being the focus, and that's a big focus of LWR's development work around the world. So that was another reason that we were drawn to this area. And many people, their crops have been completely destroyed, and they're really faced with the challenge of starting from zero. So we hope that we'll be able to contribute our expertise and work with them in this building process.
Yeah, one of the things we found was almost everyone was a farmer. Even if they had another job, they had a few coffee trees or banana plants, trees, fruit trees, and to a person, they all said, "I lost it all. It's all gone." And they were very sorry to see those go, to see that damage. It was a big loss for them. It was a source of income and food.
And that's a hard thing to imagine, to really conceptualize, to lose everything and have to start from zero. So I think that in our project and in our support, that what we hope is that we can play a role in that road to recuperation. So.
Can you tell us about a person you met or a story that you heard that was particularly moving for either of you?
Yeah, I mean, John and I were talking about this before we did the live, and I think we both we visited a house together and spoke to an older man, what is maybe mid-70s.
Yeah, early 70s, 72.
And he had built this. He had been a farmer his entire life, and his house was at the edge of a ravine. It was one of these wooden houses where the back had been completely blown off. It was missing its back walls. The house is completely destroyed. The roof is missing, and he had told us this story about he built this house for his wife, who was in the hospital dying of cancer. And what this house represented to him, as far as since his wife died, being able to, after living in rentals their whole life, being able to build this house that he could take her home to and spend the last years of their lives. And when he talked about it wasn't just the house and the place that he lived. He was living with his grandson and their family. But all of his memories, all of his photos, his clothes, his plates that he had collected that reminded him of his wife were destroyed. So it's really, I think that story communicated to me what it means to lose everything. Mm-hmm. For someone who had this was more than just a home, a place where you lay your head at night. It was his entire life and something that he worked for his whole life. And I think that a lot of people of the same age and the same demographic are experiencing something similar in Puerto Rico, mm-hmm. who have lost their homes. And he was fortunate enough to have, family that he could stay with, but a lot of people don't have that luxury. And so I think that was sort of a microcosm of the damage that we saw during our time there.
Yeah, it seemed like a lot of people who lost their homes were elderly, mm-hmm. and very vulnerable. I have not a person but a place that really stuck with me, mm-hmm. and that's a high school, the local high school that had been turned into a homeless shelter. Mm-hmm. And people had been there since before Maria started, and basically they turned the classrooms into little houses for people. The desks were shoved to one side, and they had cots in the corner, and we met all sorts of people there that really they had nowhere else to go. Mm-hmm. These were the people who were most in need because they didn't have, for whatever reason, family or some other place that they could take shelter. Mm-hmm. And so they were kind of stuck in this high school. We met a young couple that was they had 2 children, about to give birth to a third.
She was 8 months pregnant.
8 months pregnant, and they just needed like $30 to move into an apartment, but they didn't have that cash to do that.
Yeah, and that would really captured for me, I agree, the limbo that this has people stuck in, because people who have had their homes destroyed, they're waiting, they've submitted a claim to have their house evaluated, and they haven't heard back. So they're waiting, they know that they could receive funding to either rebuild their house or get back on track, but no one knows when it's coming, and it's really got people in this very difficult limbo that makes it really hard for them to get back on track to rebuild their lives. So we just hope that in our intervention in that particular case, we want to prioritize people that are living in a refuge, that are homeless, and we've addressed that in our needs assessment, but we want to just play a role in the road to recuperation, and we really, again, thank everyone for contributing to our efforts.
So that's about all the time we have for today. If you want more information or to donate to the project, you can go to www.lwr.org. And if you have any more questions, just type them in the comments section, and we will answer them, no matter when you do it. And you can, this recording is going to be archived, so you can watch it later, share it with your friends, just let people know what's going on. We really appreciate that.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for your time.